Clean up or get out, Black." The shout sliced through the hospital hallway like a blade. A furious white doctor pointed straight at a black janitor kneeling on the floor with a mop in hand. No one spoke. No one dared to look at her, but just behind them, someone was watching silently. Leo XIII, the newly elected pope, a man who grew up orphaned, raised by that very woman, now being humiliated in public. She had wiped away his tears so that one day he could inspire a world. Minutes later, the entire St. Mary's Hospital would bow in apology to the woman they had just tried to disgrace. This is a true story about racism, the contempt for labor, and the quiet reckoning that made an entire system fall silent. Because sometimes the one you shame today is the very person who once raised a global spiritual leader. St. Mary's Hospital. A long corridor bathed in pale fluorescent light. The air carried a faint scent of disinfectant. The windows were shut, tight, with the first drops of early-season rain clinging to layers of dust. At the far end of the hall, a black woman in her early 60s wearing a faded janitor uniform was bent over, wiping away streaks of water left from the night shift. From the opposite end, a heavy-set white female doctor came rushing through in a spotless white coat, her lips painted a harsh, vivid red. She glanced at the "Caution Wet Floor" sign, then down at the floor that hadn't yet dried. Deliberately, she flicked the edge of her coat through a puddle and kicked the mop aside. With a sharp voice, she barked, "What kind of cleaning is that? You think this is some filthy street market? Go clean the damn bus station if that's what you're used to." The older woman bowed her head. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "I'm sorry, doctor." People passed by without stopping. A few young nurses chuckled quietly. No one stood up for her. She quietly stepped back, picked up the fallen caution sign, and went back to scrubbing the floor. On a bench nearby sat a man in a simple black cassock. He said nothing. He had watched. The whole thing. His face was stern, his eyes deep and thoughtful. No one noticed him. A security guard walked by and muttered, "Hey, no loitering here. If you're a pilgrim, take it outside." The man didn't respond. He just gave a slow, respectful nod. No one knew that the woman being yelled at was the silent foster mother of an orphaned child, and that the man mistaken for a wandering pilgrim was the pontiff of the Catholic Church. Leo XIV, the current pope, wasn't wearing his papal vestments today. No white zucchetto, no pectoral cross, no Vatican entourage. Just a simple black cassock, dark trousers, and plain leather shoes. He arrived at St. Mary's Hospital in silence. No papal motorcade, no Swiss guards, no advance notice, because today he came to witness what power often blinds people from seeing. He walked into the inpatient ward, the area with the most complaints. As he turned toward the main corridor, a white nurse about 30 years old stepped in front of him. She wore a crisp new uniform, her hair tied in a tight bun. She held out her arms, eyes cold. "This area isn't open to visitors. If you don't have clearance or referral from the chief physician, please go back to the waiting zone. That's where outsiders belong." She looked him up and down. "And what are you doing here? Are you even supposed to be here? Do you have any paperwork?" Leo said nothing. He simply bowed his head slightly and gave a gentle smile. Not a smile of anger, but one of quiet endurance. A smile from someone who's seen this all before, too often. And still, it stings every time. In his heart, he heard the voice of his foster mother, Aminata. There are places where your skin walks in before your name ever does. Leo turned and walked another way, heading deeper into the hospital. Each step he took left a deeper mark in his memory. He didn't need to meet a doctor, didn't need to look at a single medical chart. He had already seen the most dangerous disease eating away at this place. Discrimination. The corridor of the inpatient ward lay still under the pale light. A strong smell of disinfectant clung to the freshly mopped floor. Leo turned a corner, his eyes fixed on a stained, peeling wall, when suddenly his foot slipped on a wet patch that hadn't dried. He stumbled, almost fell onto the cold stone floor. But in that instant, a trembling yet steady hand caught his arm just in time. It belonged to an older woman wearing a faded janitor's uniform, her head wrapped in a scarf, a damp mop still in her hand. She stammered, eyes wide with panic. "I'm so sorry. I just finished cleaning. I didn't realize." But Leo didn't look at the floor. He looked up at the woman with her head bowed and then froze in place. The world stood still for a moment. The silver hair, that voice, the way her hand rested gently on his shoulder. All of it pulled him back to a childhood long gone. The nights of burning fever, the thin bowls of rice porridge, the lullabies sung in a soft, low voice. He asked, his voice low, "What's your name?" The woman flinched slightly. She looked up, eyes weary but endlessly patient. "Aminata, sir." A name like thunder in clear skies. Leo's heart clenched as if his entire childhood had just opened up in a single moment. Aminata, the name sewn into an old swaddling cloth, the woman who held him as he cried for his mother, who turned a straw hut into his first home. He stepped back, his eyes wide, his hand trembling just slightly. "Aminata, is it really you?" Aminata looked closer now, her eyes welling up. "Leonardo," she whispered like someone calling out to an old dream. And in that instant, all titles vanished. All power, all papacy, all His Holiness melted away. All that remained was a boy who once called her Mama Nina, and a woman who shielded him from beatings, hunger, and loneliness. Hospital cafeteria. Pale light washed over. Trays of cold rice and long lines of exhausted staff waited their turn. Pope Leo XIV, still just a man in a plain cassock, walked silently beside Aminata, the woman he had just recognized as the foster mother he'd lost 30 years ago. She spoke softly. "They don't let me eat during the same hour as the doctors, but if I go earlier, they scold me for trying to take someone else's portion." He looked at her, his face calm, but inside a silent storm was rising. "From now on, Mama, you stand with me." They stood in line for food. No one noticed. No one knew until two white doctors walked up. One of them, overweight and wearing thick glasses, spoke loudly. "Janitors eat last. Don't mix with the technical staff. And you? Who are you? A patient's family. The charity food line is down on the ground floor." Without waiting for a response, they shoved Aminata's tray aside, soup splashing onto her shirt. She staggered. Leo caught her in time. Just a few feet away, a young medical student had been live-streaming a hospital tour. The camera was still rolling. Leo straightened. He looked directly at the two doctors, not with anger, but with a silence so cold it cut deeper than any shout. "She's not an outsider. She's the one who saved a child, abandoned and starving, caught between poverty and death. And that child was me." One of the doctors sneered. "Sorry, and who exactly are you to stand here preaching morality? If you care so much about janitors, maybe you should clean floors with them." At that moment, Leo quietly took out a handkerchief and wiped the soup from Aminata's trembling hand. Then, without a word, he stepped forward into the center of the room. He unbuttoned his outer cassock, revealing a small pectoral cross fastened neatly to the inside collar. The room went still, frozen. The man you just accused of cutting in the charity line is the Pope, and the woman you pushed aside is the one he chose to kneel for just to wipe a drop of soup from her hand. Late afternoon, the main conference hall at St. Mary's Hospital. The room was packed. Doctors, nurses, administrators, and medical students gathered for their routine meeting. No one noticed the man in the plain cassock as he entered quietly, until he stepped up to the podium and placed a hand on the microphone. Leo spoke calmly. "Before we continue this meeting, I'd like to request the hallway security footage from the cafeteria." The technical manager started to object, but caught Leo's gaze, hesitated, then nodded. The large screen lit up. Footage of Aminata, the janitor, standing in line. 2 white doctors shoving her aside, shouting, "Janitors eat last." Leo speaking up, only to be mocked. "If you're defending them, you must be fresh off the street." A nurse gasped under her breath. "Oh my God, it's him!" All eyes shifted from the screen to the man standing at the podium, now bathed in stage light, the face of Pope Leo XIV. He slowly removed the small pectoral cross from his chest. His voice wasn't loud, but it rang through the room like thunder. "I am Leo XIV, pontiff of the Catholic Church. I came to this hospital wearing a simple cassock, and in just a few hours I was dismissed, criticized, categorized, not because of any spiritual reason, but because of the color of my skin. If I, a pope, can be treated this way right here in this city, then what about the poor, those without titles, the janitors?" He turned to Aminata, still standing in the back, hands still damp from mopping. "And this woman, she once raised me when I was just a motherless child, living on the kindness of strangers in a forgotten village. Today, she's treated as invisible, but it is she and thousands like her who carry the dignity of this world on their backs." No one said a word. One doctor lowered his head in shame. An HR manager trembled, dropping a file of documents. And the young med student who had been live streaming the entire time whispered, "This isn't just a meeting anymore. This is a public trial." Less than 24 hours after Pope Leo XIV's speech, the Vatican's Dicastery for Integral Human Development launched an emergency full-scale investigation into St. Mary's Hospital. The initial findings sparked global outrage. The 2 doctors captured in the security footage were suspended indefinitely. The head nurse of the emergency unit, who had silently witnessed the discrimination, issued a formal public apology to the entire Black community, posted on the Vatican's official platform. In her letter, she wrote, "I didn't directly insult anyone, but I stayed silent when I should have spoken up, and that silence is the worst thing I've ever done." At the same time, something unprecedented unfolded in the city's main square. Aminata, the elderly janitor with calloused hands, stepped onto a stage surrounded by cameras and thousands of citizens. Wearing a simple traditional outfit, she choked up with emotion as the Pope bestowed upon her a rare and honorable title, Guardian of Dignity for St. Mary's Hospital. Leo addressed the crowd. "We can rebuild a hospital, but we cannot heal its wounds unless we respect the ones who kept it clean, not just with their hands, but with their character." In the front row, an old colleague of Aminata's, Fatu, a retired nurse, covered her face, weeping. I saw her get splashed, shouted at, treated like she didn't exist, and I laughed it off because I was scared of being treated the same. Today, I just want to say I'm sorry for being the second black woman who didn't protect her. Hashtags. Respect for Aminata and No More Silence exploded across social media worldwide. Students pinned Aminata's photo in their classrooms. Young doctors wrote her name on their lab coats as a living symbol of resistance against discrimination. One Catholic university announced that the story of Aminata and Leo would now be part of its theology curriculum in a course titled Ethics in Human Dignity. At the Vatican, there were no grand ceremonies, only an elderly woman walking slowly. Up to the stage passed rows of cardinals, priests, and ordinary citizens. Aminata wore a deep indigo robe, a simple shawl draped over her shoulders. And yet, with every step she took, the entire room rose to its feet. Pope Leo XIV choked up as he held the microphone. I lost my mother when I was 5, and when I had no one to call family, it was Aminata who quietly wiped my tears. Today, before this entire world, it is time for us to wipe hers. He handed her a papal certificate of honor, signed personally by the pontiff himself. Next, he presented her with an official property deed, a small, fully furnished home in the heart of the city, close to a school, close to a hospital, the very hospital where she had worked for nearly 30 years. Then Leo announced the creation of the Aminata Scholarship for children and students who, like him, grew up with nothing but potential. No one is born nameless. It's just that society forgets to say their name. Aminata stood to speak, her hands trembling. I don't have many words, but I have a heart. And today, I want to say just one thing. I don't need money. I don't need titles. I just want to hear it one more time, that I am called Mother. After the ceremony of honor, Aminata returned to the small village where she had spent half her life living like a shadow. Neighbors gathered beneath an old olive tree, laying out a simple meal, bread, olives, and herbal tea. No music, no cameras, just proud eyes and stories passed on through laughter and warmth. A 9-year-old girl named Adma, who lived nearby, tugged at Aminata's hand and asked, Auntie, why did you never tell me you raised the Pope? Aminata gently patted the girl's head and answered softly, like she was sharing a secret every child should one day learn. Because I didn't do it for people to know. I did it because a child needed love. Love doesn't need proof, and not everything needs to be shown off. In a quiet corner of the yard, someone snapped a photo of an old woman, silver-haired and small-framed, holding a child close to her chest. That photo would later appear on the cover of a new theology textbook in a chapter titled The Silent Women Who Lifted a World with Their Bare Hands. You've just heard a true story, but maybe it's unfolding somewhere around you right now. An elderly woman quietly mopping a hospital hallway, a skinny security guard unlocking the church gates every morning, a street sweeper brushing away the night's dust from your neighborhood. Have you ever asked their name? Have you ever paused for 3 seconds to smile at them? We live in a world that celebrates achievement. But it's the unnoticed ones who keep this world clean, safe, and human. If someone ever cared for you, taught you, helped you, and you've never said thank you, then maybe today is the perfect day to do it. Because it's not power, but gratitude that creates the biggest changes in this life.